The night Emily Harper noticed the change began like any other quiet evening in the Connecticut house she had lived in for nearly 12 years, a house that still carried the memory of her late husband Daniel in every corner, from the worn armchair by the window to the framed photos lining the hallway, and she told herself she was used to the silence by now, that 3 years was enough time to learn how to breathe without him. Yet that night something felt different, heavier, as rain fell steadily outside and the wind pressed against the windows like it was trying to get in, and Emily stood alone in the kitchen long after dinner, holding a mug she had forgotten to drink from, her thoughts drifting between the past and the fragile present, when she felt a presence behind her, subtle but undeniable, the kind that makes the skin tighten before the mind understands why, and when she turned, she saw Ryan standing near the doorway, Daniel's son, tall, quiet, his expression unreadable. And for a moment neither of them spoke, the ticking clock filling the space between them, and Emily felt an unexpected flutter in her chest that she immediately tried to dismiss, because Ryan was family, because she had known him since he was a teenager visiting during summers, because she had once packed his lunches and listened to his college plans with polite interest, but the man standing there now was not the boy she remembered, and that realization unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, as Ryan broke the silence by asking if she was okay, his voice calm but low, and she nodded too quickly, turning back to the sink as if focusing on something small could protect her from something larger, something she did not yet have a name for, yet she could feel his eyes on her, not casual, not careless, but thoughtful, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time, and when she finally looked back at him, she caught it, that shift, that pause in his gaze that lingered a second too long, and in that second Emily felt a sharp awareness of herself, of the room, of the quiet, of how alone they both were under the same roof. And memories rushed in without warning, memories of Daniel's laughter, of family dinners, of promises made and broken by time, and she felt guilt rise up before anything else could, because nothing had happened, nothing was supposed to happen, and yet her heart had reacted before her mind could stop it, and Ryan seemed to sense her discomfort. Stepping back slightly, offering a small smile that felt careful, controlled, but something had already shifted between them, something invisible but real, like a line quietly redrawn. And Emily told herself she was imagining it, that grief played tricks on lonely people, that shared sadness could feel like connection when it was only survival, but even as she said those things in her head, she knew she would remember this moment, the way the light from the kitchen lamp caught Ryan's face, the way his expression held a question he did not ask, the way her own breath felt shallow and uncertain, and when he finally said goodnight and walked upstairs, Emily stood there long after, staring at the empty doorway, her heart pounding not with fear, but with the frightening realization that something had begun the moment he looked at her differently, and she did not yet know whether that beginning would heal her or break her. After that night, life inside the house began to move differently. As if the air itself had changed, and Emily noticed it in small ways that were easy to ignore but impossible to forget, like how Ryan started waking up earlier and sitting at the kitchen table when she made coffee, how their talks grew longer without effort, how silence between them no longer felt empty but full. And Emily told herself this was normal, that two adults sharing grief would naturally lean on conversation, yet something about the way Ryan listened made her uneasy in a way she could not explain, because he did not rush to speak or fill gaps with noise, he simply paid attention, and when Emily spoke about her day, about work, about neighbors, about nothing important, Ryan remembered details she barely noticed herself, and it made her feel seen in a way she had not felt since Daniel passed, and that feeling scared her more than loneliness ever had, because loneliness was familiar, safe in its sadness, but this awareness stirred something awake inside her that she had carefully put to sleep, and the days passed quickly, blending into one another, and one afternoon while cleaning the hall closet, Emily found an old box of photos she had not touched in years, and without thinking, she carried it into the living room where Ryan sat reading, and they began flipping through the pictures together, laughing softly at old hairstyles and clothes, until Ryan stopped at a photo of Emily and Daniel standing close on their wedding day, and for a long moment he said nothing, his thumb resting on the edge of the picture as if he was afraid it might disappear, and when he finally spoke, his voice was steady but quiet, saying that his father had looked truly happy that day, and Emily felt a sudden tightness in her throat, because she remembered that happiness, remembered believing it would last forever, and she told Ryan that Daniel had loved him deeply, that everything he did was for his family, and Ryan nodded, but his eyes lifted from the photo to her face, holding her there, and Emily felt the weight of that look settle on her chest, not heavy, but warm, and she stood up too fast, pretending she needed to put the box away, telling herself she was overthinking everything, that emotions blurred when people lived too close to the past. Yet even as she moved through the house, she felt Ryan's presence behind her, not following, not chasing, just existing in the same space. And at night, when Emily lay alone in her bed, she found her thoughts returning to moments she had tried to dismiss, to the sound of his voice, to the calm way he spoke, to how he never treated her like someone fragile or broken, and she hated herself for noticing these things, for feeling comfort where there should have been distance. And the next morning she resolved to create space, to be busier, to remind herself who she was and what lines could never be crossed. But when she walked into the kitchen and saw Ryan standing by the window, sunlight falling across his face as he turned and smiled gently at her, that resolve weakened, not because she wanted something forbidden, but because she felt something honest, something human, and that frightened her more than anything else, because deep down she knew this was no longer just about shared grief or simple kindness. It was about a quiet pull growing stronger each day, one that neither of them had spoken aloud, yet both were beginning to feel, and Emily realized with a sudden ache that pretending it did not exist would soon become harder than facing it. The storm came suddenly, dark clouds rolling over the Connecticut hills, and as the wind rattled the windows and rain streaked the glass, Emily found herself in the living room with Ryan, candles flickering and casting shadows that danced across the walls, turning the familiar house into something both intimate and strange. And the power outage forced them into an unexpected closeness, sitting across from each other on the couch with nothing but the soft glow of candlelight. And Emily noticed how different he looked in that quiet, private light. How his eyes held a depth she had never seen before, not just her husband's son, but a man who carried grief, memories, and understanding in every line of his face. And Ryan spoke first, breaking the silence that had stretched longer than she realized, saying he had never thanked her properly for staying after Daniel died, for keeping the house together, for holding the family steady when he had felt lost and angry. And Emily felt her throat tighten because gratitude from him had always been simple before, casual, polite, but now it carried weight, emotion, and something unspoken between them. And she replied softly that she had nowhere else to go, that the house had always been hers too. And Ryan nodded, but his gaze did not leave her, lingering in a way that made Emily's heart beat faster than she wanted. And for the first time, she noticed how much he seemed to see her beyond the role she had always played in his life, beyond being his father's widow, as if he recognized her for who she truly was, with her loneliness, her quiet strength, and her lingering sadness. And then he shifted slightly, moving closer but stopping, careful, respectful, as if measuring a line he dared not cross, and said simply, "I see you." And Emily's breath caught, because those two words held so much more than acknowledgement. They held understanding, longing, and a connection neither had planned. And she tried to pull back, reminding herself of who he was, of what was right, of the line that could never be crossed, whispering, "We can't." And Ryan nodded, his own expression flashing pain, but his silence spoke louder than words, because the truth had already been revealed in that moment, in the way their eyes locked, in the way their hands twitched almost toward each other but stayed still, in the weight of emotion that settled between them heavier than the storm outside. And Emily felt a mixture of fear, warmth, and longing, all tangled together, a complicated knot she did not yet know how to untangle. And as the rain poured and thunder rolled, she realized that night had changed everything. That something quiet and unspoken had awakened, and neither of them could pretend it did not exist. And when the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room, the spell broke, leaving Emily with a pulse that would not slow, a heart that was restless, and a mind racing with questions she was not ready to answer. The morning after the storm, Emily awoke to find a folded envelope on the kitchen table, plain and unassuming. But her heart raced as she picked it up, recognizing Ryan's careful handwriting on the front. And as she opened it, her eyes scanned the words he had written with a mix of honesty and restraint, explaining everything he felt the night before, admitting the connection he could not ignore, yet also acknowledging the boundaries he knew they must honor. And Emily felt a wave of emotion crash over her, relief, sadness, and a strange warmth, because he had chosen to be truthful rather than impulsive, showing the depth of his character. And as she folded the letter back, she realized how much courage it took for him to write what he did, for both of them to confront feelings they could not act on. And while sitting down to process her own tangled emotions, she noticed another envelope tucked beneath a stack of old papers on the study desk, her curiosity mingling with trepidation. And when she opened it, she found Daniel's familiar handwriting, a note she had never read before, A letter meant to reassure her that life could continue even after loss, that love could still be felt without guilt, that seeking connection was not a betrayal, and Emily's hands trembled as she held the paper to her chest, tears slipping freely down her cheeks, because Daniel's words felt like a blessing from the past, a permission she had been denying herself, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the mixture of grief and hope, and she thought of Ryan, of his honesty, of the quiet respect he had shown by stepping back, and she felt a complex blend of sorrow and gratitude, understanding that love and longing were not always meant to be acted upon, that sometimes the right choice was the hardest, and yet the memory of that night remained vivid, the intensity of their unspoken bond, the way his eyes had searched hers, the way her own heart had responded despite every reason not to, and Emily realized she had grown, that she had faced feelings she could not ignore and had chosen integrity over desire, and in that moment, sitting alone in the soft morning light, she understood that this choice, painful as it was, had given her a kind of freedom she had not expected, a quiet strength that would guide her in the days ahead, and though the house felt emptier without Ryan nearby, it was lighter too, filled with the knowledge that love could exist in many forms, that respect and restraint could carry their own kind of beauty, and that sometimes the hardest truths taught the most important lessons, leaving Emily with a heart both heavier and fuller, ready to step into a new chapter shaped by wisdom, courage, and the gentle echoes of the past.